Hello my friends, in today's video I want to share with you 4 free BST plugins, equalizers that are emulations of a famous analog piece of gear. I'm talking about this one, the Pultec EQ. This is an analog piece of gear that was invented in the 1950s. It's an equalizer that was and is still used on a lot of pro records, famous albums of some of your favorite bands. This equalizer costs around $4,000 right now. The thing that made this equalizer famous and highly used by so many engineers is that it adds subtle saturation and harmonics to the sound. It's not a linear EQ. Also, it's very simple to use. It doesn't have a lot of controls. It has very cool and unique EQ curves that I want to share with you and analyze in today's video. I want to go over the controls, what they do, analyze the curves, analyze the harmonics also that they add to the sound, and of course I want to test these 4 free BST plugins on an actual mix. All of the download links are going to be down below in the description and first comment, and don't forget to check out the timestamps as well for you to move around between the mini segments of the video. My name is Amner Hunter from amnerhunter.com, the place where you can get tons of free resources, content, and tools for music production and guitar. Thank you very much for being here and welcome. Before we dive into the content, my friends, I would like to invite you to my website, amnerhunter.com. I have a couple of PDF ebooks and guides totally free for you, one for music producers, the other one for guitar players. I have also a set of tools such as presets of some plugins, a super package of guitar impulses, my Cubase mixing template and workflow, and finally don't forget to check out my blog, which I'm updating weekly with tons of free content. Without further ado, let's get to the video. I'm inside my session here in Cubase and I have this metal mix. I'm gonna apply the 4 different equalizers on the master channel, as you see here. I'm gonna start with some of the controls and some of the features that these plugins have. Afterwards, I'm gonna analyze the curves of these equalizers and also the harmonics that they add to the signal. So let's start with this one. This is from the company Ignite Amps. It's the PTEq-X. They added to this plugin another emulation of another Pultec EQ, the mid-range. So the original Pultec only has this section in the middle, and they added also some filters that the original version of the Pultec equalizer doesn't have, the low cut filter and the high cut. First up here we have the mid-range part of the EQ. The controls are fixed. You can select 200 Hz, 300, 500. Here is the boost knob. You can boost from 0 decibels up to 10 decibels. Afterwards, you have another knob where you select these frequencies from 200 Hz up to 7000 Hz. This dip knob allows you to attenuate the frequencies which you selected here. Right here we have a peak knob. It will boost on these frequencies from 1.5 kilohertz up to 5K. Then we move to this part where you can select these frequencies from 20 hertz to 150. The low end you can boost and attenuate. And then you have the high frequencies, right? From 3K up to 16K, the boost, the attenuation. Also, you can select another cool curve to attenuate the selected frequencies. This bandwidth, it's applied to the high frequencies, and it's like the Q curve. Here it's narrower and here it's wider. You have this tube switch where you can add some tube saturation to the signal. Very, very subtle. Down below you have the low cut filters or high pass and the high cut or low pass filter. These filters are not originally in the equalizer, but it's a nice addition to this plugin to have these filters. You can turn off every section with this switch. You have the input and output knob. You can set it to stereo or mono, and you have an oversampling of 2x for more quality and to avoid digital distortion on a mastering situation, for instance. Then we have the RareSE from the company Analog Obsession. As you see here, we have the same knob to select the frequency, the boost and attenuation knob, the knob to select the frequencies on the highs, boost and attenuation, and the attenuation selection also on the high frequencies, and the bandwidth knob, broad and sharp or narrower. If you double click, it resets to default. Analog Obsession added another cool feature, the mid-side processing. If you select this switch to the left, which stands for mid and side, you can affect the middle part of the mix or down below the sides part of the mix. To do this, we can select here on link, and the upper part EQ is gonna be independently from the one that is on the sides. Very cool addition that the original EQ doesn't have. And right here you have the output knob to compensate the gain or the volume of the signal that is processed. For this video, I'm gonna leave it by default, which is link and affect the whole mix. I'm not gonna affect independently the middle part of the mix in the sides. So everything is linked. As you see here, you have here the oversampling, very useful for a more quality and to avoid digital distortion. But let's remember that when you engage oversampling, the plugin consumes more CPU power. Then we have the SonEQ from the company Sonimus. You have here the boost and attenuation knob, and here you select the low frequencies from 20 to 100 Hz. You have here the mid band. You can select from 150 up to 4K, and with this knob you boost or cut. Double click and it resets the knob. You have the high knob here. You can select here the frequency. They added as well the high pass filter and the low pass. This switch is the EQ curve for the mid band. Here it's a narrower curve and here it's a wider curve. You have the input and output. They also added this output clip, which is a red light in case that you are clipping the signal, which is not recommended. And you can turn on this drive knob to add some subtle harmonics and distortion. We're gonna analyze that. You have a cool VU meter here. Lastly, we have the Warmy EP1A tube EQ from the company Kiive or Kiive Audio. I don't know how that's pronounced. And this is the newest and latest plugin emulation of the Pultec. It was released some days ago. They are giving it away for free as well. And this is a very cool piece of software. You have the boost and cut knob, and you select the frequency here like the others. This bandwidth, it's for the high frequencies, so a broad band and sharp band. You can select the frequencies here. You have here the boost for the high frequencies, and you have here the cut. Some minor differences between the others. You have some presets here, very cool. In case that you wanna just experiment, you have the oversampling up to 16K. Very cool to have this option for mastering mostly. This mix knob is a cool addition. It adds distortion and saturation to the signal. We're gonna check on that later. You have the output and input knob here, and very cool that you have an undo and redo control. In case that you just wanna go back to something that you did, you can undo. Very cool to have. Now I have the 4 plugins in line here, and I wanna analyze with this EQ curve analyzer some of the curves of the controls. Let's start with the PTEq-X from Ignite Amps. The moment you turn on the plugin, it adds a little curve here, a little dip here on the low end, as you see here. So let's, for instance, add 200 Hz. This is the type of curve. This is the dip. You can select the frequencies. You have the peak. Let's analyze what this does to the signal. Very cool curves that you can get, very unique. That's the peak, 753. From 1.5 to 5, this is the boost. It's like a low shelf, right? The attenuation to add some bottom end to the signal, and let's boost here 16K, and you have the sharp band or broad band. Just lower this. This is the high frequency curve, adding a little bit of air and highs to the signal, attenuation, and the attenuation frequency selection. You can turn off this section. This tube switch, adding something to the signal. We're gonna check on that on another analyzer. And you have here the low cut and high cut, right? You can turn it off here as well. I'm gonna turn on now the RareSE plugin. As you see here, it's dipping a little bit here in the high frequencies. As soon as I turn it on, I'm gonna boost just 100 Hz, for instance. Attenuate here on the high end, 8K, let's say. This is the curve, attenuation. I'm not gonna be using the mid-side processing, so everything that I do here is linked. And this is the bandwidth, narrower or wider. Double click and it resets. Let's turn it off. Let's move on with this equalizer. As soon as you turn it on, it's changing the curve a little bit. The boost on the low end. Very cool. You can change this. You can get very unusual curves, but very musical nevertheless. You have the high pass filter, the low pass. So let's put everything, reset everything here. Let's turn on the drive knob. As you see here, warmer here in the lows. This is the harmonics that is adding on the lows of the signal. Very cool. Turn off, turn on. Let's turn it off. Let's move on with the last EQ plugin. As soon as you turn it on, it's also changing the signal like this, filtering out some of these frequencies that we cannot hear anyway, and also has a low cut. As you see here, you have the boost, the lows. Select the frequency, the cut, the boost on the high frequencies, the bandwidth, right, and like this. So let's reset everything. By default, just double clicking. That's the signal by default. And if you increase the mix knob, which is the distortion or saturation, we're gonna check further on this. What I wanna do now is I wanna analyze the harmonics that these plugins add to the signal. I'm gonna play a sound that is in 100 Hertz and let's see how these plugins behave. This is the sound that I'm analyzing, and as you see here, the fundamental frequency is in the 100 Hertz area. These are some of the peaks. As you see here, this is in like 200 Hertz, 300 Hertz, right? So every 100 Hertz, the signal is behaving like this. So I just want to turn on first the PTEq-X to see if changes something in the signal here. So it seems that this plugin is not adding anything. It's not very noticeable anyway. Let's continue with this one. I'm gonna turn it on to see if something changes here. It's not very noticeable. Maybe you have some peaks here additionally, which are the harmonics. Not very noticeable again, pretty transparent. Now let's analyze the SonEQ. Here we can add the drive to see what it does. As you see here, the peaks are being increased. These are the harmonics that this plugin is adding to the signal. It's enhancing or exaggerating a bit the harmonics, the 200 Hertz, 300 Hertz, 400 Hertz harmonics, as you see here. Right. Let's move on with the last EQ plugin. As soon as you turn on the plugin, it adds a little bit of peaks here, but let's just increase this mix knob, which is the saturation. As you see here, more harmonics are being added to the signal the more you increase this. These are the differences between them. The Warmy EP1A changes more the signal when it comes to harmonics or subtle saturation and distortion. The last visual analysis that I want to make here, I want to put all the equalizers in the same settings to analyze the different curves. For this equalizer, I'm just gonna focus on the middle part of the plugin, which is the main emulation of the original piece of gear. I'm gonna boost 100 Hertz, 5 decibels. Let's say I'm gonna add a little air here. I'm gonna boost 5 decibels, let's say. I'm gonna select 10K here also. This is the curve that I have on the Ignites amp PTEq, the curve on the RareSE with the same settings, the curve that I have on the Sonimus EQ, the curve that I have on the Warmy EQ. I want to give you right now, my friends, is a very useful tip, very useful advice when using this plugin. Something that is very unique when using this plugin is to boost and attenuate the frequency at the same time. So for instance, here on the PTEq-X, when you boost and attenuate the frequency, it creates this very unique curve. It's like it cleans the low end part of the spectrum. This is a cool trick when using this plugin that I recommend you very much, because let's think about it. Most plugins don't let you do this. So this is a pretty cool, unique thing and feature that was added to this equalizer. For instance, if you boost 5 decibels on 100 Hz, you also can attenuate this. It will make your low end more fuller and more clean. I'm just gonna fiddle and play around with the knobs. I'm gonna play with them. Now in a full mix, I'm gonna apply these equalizers on the master channel. I'm just gonna be turning them off and on and playing with these settings, boosting a little bit of low end. Also, I'm gonna be attenuating for you to hear this cool trick. Maybe 5 decibels on the low end and 100 Hz, it could be a little bit too much. I just wanted to exaggerate these frequencies just to give you an idea of how it sounds, and also using this attenuation control at the same time using the boost. Notice how the low end, instead of being like too boomy, just using the boost, it cleans a lot those low frequencies. And always make sure, my friends, when you are doing some test with any plugin, just make sure to compensate the output part of the plugin. Let me know down below in the comments, my friends, which one was your favorite plugin out of this list. Maybe judging the sound of them, or maybe judging the workflow or special features. Before we go, my friends, I would like to invite you to my website, amnorhunter.com. I have additional free stuff that I want you to have. I have a couple of PDF ebooks and guides, one for music producers, the other one for guitar players. I have also some tools such as presets of some plugins, a super package of guitar impulses, also my Cubase mixing template and workflow, among other utilities. And finally, don't forget to check out my blog, which I'm updating weekly with tons of free content. Thank you very much for watching the video, my friends, and I'll see you on the next one. Alright? Take care.